Commander Lyra stood on the bridge of the Stellara, her tall frame silhouetted against the vast expanse of space visible through the observation window. The sleek lines of the Viation cruiser hummed with efficiency around her, the bridge crew working in disciplined silence. Everything about the ship reflected Viation values: functional, austere, devoid of unnecessary comforts. Just as it should be. Lyra's iridescent skin caught the light as she turned, her eyes, three vertical slits of silver, narrowing as she reviewed the holographic displays. The Viation prided themselves on their psionic discipline and strict hierarchical society. As a commander, Lyra embodied these ideals, from her impeccable posture to her carefully controlled emotions. Commander, her first officer, Varen, approached with the precise, measured steps of their kind. We've detected a vessel near the disputed border. Human design, severely damaged. Lyra felt a familiar tightness in her chest at the word human. 5 cycles ago, she had led a diplomatic mission to establish relations with a human outpost. Their unpredictability had resulted in the death of half her crew. The official records blamed a technical malfunction, but Lyra knew better. Humans were dangerous precisely because they were so inconsistent. On screen, she ordered. The display shifted to show a small, battered transport ship drifting against the backdrop of stars. The vessel's hull was scarred with plasma burns and debris impacts. Identification markers labeled it as the Wanderer, a human cargo vessel. Life signs: 1 survivor, Commander. Human, male, appears to be conscious. Lyra considered her options. The ship was in Viation space, barely, but enough to justify intervention. Protocol demanded they investigate any vessel crossing their borders, especially one in distress. Prepare a retrieval team. Full security protocols. Bring the survivor to Interrogation Chamber 3. As a retrieval team departed, Lyra descended to the lower decks. The interrogation chamber was Spartan but imposing, designed to emphasize the authority of Viation over any prisoner. Lyra positioned herself at the head of the room, her ceremonial cloak draped over her shoulders, a subtle enhancement of her psionic presence filling the space. When the doors slid open, Lyra's first impression of the human was his ordinariness. Average height for his species, with brown hair and unremarkable features. Only his eyes stood out, dark, alert, and strangely calm for someone who had just survived shipwreck. He wore standard cargo technician coveralls, dirty and torn in places. According to the retrieval team's report, his name was Kale, a low-level cargo technician with minimal security clearance. His file was suspiciously sparse. That alone raised questions. The guards positioned him in the center of the room, then stood at attention by the door. Lyra let the silence stretch, a tactic that usually unsettled prisoners. Kale didn't fidget. He simply waited, his gaze direct but not challenging. Lyra stepped forward, allowing her psionic energy to ripple subtly through the room. You have violated Viation territory, human. Your vessel has been impounded, and you are now subject to our authority. Kale nodded once, his expression unchanged. Kneel, human, Lyra commanded, her voice resonating with the weight of Viation authority. It was standard procedure when dealing with potential threats. Establish dominance immediately. She expected resistance, fear, perhaps even defiance. Humans rarely responded well to direct commands from aliens. What she didn't expect was the fluid grace with which Kale lowered himself to one knee, then the other. His movements were practiced, almost ritualistic. He bowed his head slightly, hands resting on his thighs, the position perfect, not of a man forced to his knees, but of someone who had assumed this posture many times before. When he looked up, there was no fear in his eyes, no resentment. Instead, there was something like satisfaction, perhaps even the ghost of a smile. Finally, he whispered, so softly Lyra almost missed it. The word sent a chill through her. This compliance wasn't submission, it was anticipation. Lyra stepped back, momentarily unsettled. Take him to holding cell 6, she ordered the guards. Highest security protocols. I want his ship's data core analyzed immediately. As they led Kale away, he maintained perfect composure. Not once did he struggle or protest. The ease of his acceptance was more disturbing than any resistance would have been. And monitor him constantly, Lyra added. Report any unusual behavior. When the room had emptied, Lyra remained, staring at the spot where Kale had knelt. His submission had been too perfect, too practiced, as if he had been waiting for that specific command. The thought unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The holding cell was a small cube with transparent walls reinforced with psionic dampeners, standard for containing potentially dangerous individuals. Kale sat cross-legged on the narrow bunk, eyes closed as if meditating. Lyra observed him through the security feed in her private quarters. For 3 hours, he had barely moved, maintaining a posture of relaxed alertness. Occasionally, his lips would move silently, as if reciting something from memory. Commander? The voice of Technical Officer Merrill came through the communication system. I've completed my initial analysis of the human vessel's data core. Report. Most of it is standard cargo manifests, navigation logs, maintenance records, all appearing normal for a vessel of that class. However, Merrill hesitated. Continue. I've discovered anomalous data packets embedded within the routine cargo logs. They're encrypted using a method I've never encountered before. It's archaic in structure, but extraordinarily sophisticated in application. Can you decrypt it? Not yet, Commander. The encryption changes its pattern when standard decryption algorithms are applied. It's almost responsive. Lyra considered this information. Continue your efforts. Priority status. Yes, Commander. Lyra turned her attention back to the security feed. Kale had opened his eyes and was now looking directly at the camera, as if he knew she was watching. He smiled slightly, then returned to his meditative state. It was time for a more direct approach. When Lyra entered the detention area, she dismissed the guards with a gesture. The cell's transparency faded to opacity as she approached, affording them privacy. The psionic dampeners remained active, although they would only partially inhibit her abilities as a Viation. Kale opened his eyes as she approached. Commander, he acknowledged with a small nod. I was wondering when you'd come. Your ship was in restricted Viation space, Lyra stated. Explain your presence. Navigation error, Kale replied smoothly. The Wanderer's systems were damaged in an ion storm 3 days ago. We were attempting repairs when the secondary systems failed. A convenient explanation. Lyra extended her psionic awareness subtly, probing for deception. To her surprise, Kale's mind was not what she expected. Most humans had disorganized thought patterns, easily penetrated and read. Kale's mind was different. Not blocked exactly, but chaotic in a deliberate way, filled with fragments of poetry, mathematical equations, and abstract images that shifted constantly. Whether this was natural or trained resistance, she couldn't tell. You're kneeling, Lyra said abruptly. Explain it. Kale smiled faintly. Is submission not what you expected? Not like that. Not from a human. Perhaps I recognize authority when I see it. Or perhaps you were prepared for this encounter. Lyra leaned closer to the transparent barrier. Your ship's data core contains encrypted information. Sophisticated encryption. Unusual for a simple cargo technician. A flicker of something. Approval. Crossed Kale's face. Have you considered that some things are meant to be discovered only by those prepared to understand them? Speak plainly, human. The old ways require old forms, Kale said cryptically. The convergence was foretold. The paths align as they must. Lyra felt her frustration rising. These riddles serve no purpose. Don't they? Kale tilted his head slightly. Your people once understood the language of stars and silence. Before the High Council decided such knowledge was inconvenient. The mention of the High Council sent a jolt through Lyra. How could this human know of Viation governance structures? Such information was not shared with outsiders. You claim knowledge of Viation affairs. I claim knowledge of many things, Commander, including why a Viation of your lineage might be particularly interested in what I carry. My lineage is irrelevant, Lyra snapped, although the comment had struck uncomfortably close to a truth she rarely acknowledged. Her family line was ancient, dating back to before the Great Reformation, when the Viation had abandoned their more mystical traditions in favor of technological advancement and rigid social structure. Is it? Kale's eyes seemed to see through her. 3 silver slits. The mark of the ancestral houses. Rare these days, I understand. Lyra stepped back, unsettled by his knowledge of Viation physiological markers and their significance. This interview is concluded. As she turned to leave, Kale spoke again. When your officer deciphers the first layer of encryption, you'll have a choice to make, Commander. The official path or the true one. Choose wisely. Lyra didn't respond, but as she walked away, she felt as if invisible threads were being woven around her, drawing her into something she didn't understand. Something that had been set in motion long before Kale and his ship had appeared at the border of Viation space. Commander, we've made a breakthrough. Meryl's excitement was evident despite his attempt to maintain Viation composure. His long fingers moved rapidly over the holographic interface as Lyra entered the analysis lab. Show me. I've managed to decrypt a small portion of the embedded data. Most of it remains inaccessible, but this segment contains coordinates. Meryl displayed a 3-dimensional star map. They point to an unexplored nebula in Sector 47 Alpha. Lyra tensed. The Veil of Whispers. Meryl looked up in surprise. You're familiar with it, Commander? Only through old texts. Lyra didn't elaborate on how she knew of a place that wasn't on official Viation star charts. The nebula was mentioned in ancient Viation myths, tales told in the ancestral houses before the Reformation. Stories of lost ships, strange energies, and whispers from the void. There's more, Meryl continued. The decrypted data contains symbols that don't match any known human language or code. However, they bear striking similarities to ancient Viation glyphs. He displayed several intricate symbols. Lyra recognized them immediately. Sacred patterns from pre-Reformation rituals, symbols that had been systematically removed from Viation historical records by the High Council centuries ago. How a human cargo vessel possess such symbols? Meryl wondered. Before Lyra could respond, another officer entered the lab. Commander, long-range sensors have detected an unusual energy signature emanating from Sector 47 Alpha. The pattern is unlike anything in our database. Show me, Lyra ordered. The display shifted to show a waveform, pulsing, irregular, yet with an underlying pattern that suggested purpose rather than natural phenomena. When did this begin? Approximately 20 minutes ago, Commander. Shortly after we began decrypting the embedded data. Lyra stared at the waveform, watching as certain peaks in the pattern aligned perfectly with the moments when Meryl had successfully broken through the encryption barriers. Is it possible the decryption process triggered this signal? She asked. Meryl looked troubled. That would suggest a connection between our systems and whatever is generating this energy signature. Such technology would be far beyond human capabilities. Lyra made a decision. According to Viation protocol, she should report these findings immediately to High Command. The presence of pre-Reformation symbols alone would trigger an immediate investigation by the Council's archivists. The coordinates to a restricted sector combined with the mysterious energy signature would likely result in a task force being dispatched. And Kale would disappear into the depths of a Viation interrogation facility, along with any knowledge he possessed. Secure this data, she ordered. Restricted access. Continue the decryption process, but isolate it from our main systems. And the energy signature, Commander, prepare a small scout vessel. I will investigate personally. Meryl's expression revealed his concern. Commander, regulations require reporting any anomalous findings in restricted sectors to High Command before. I'm aware of regulations, Officer Meryl. Lyra cut him off. But given my ship's proximity and the potential security implications, an immediate preliminary investigation is justified. Her tone left no room for argument. You will continue your work here and maintain regular ship operations in my absence. After Meryl had departed, Lyra returned to the detention area. This time, She entered Kale's cell directly, dismissing the guards to a distance that would allow private conversation. Kale looked up, unsurprised. You found the coordinates. It wasn't a question. Lyra didn't bother pretending otherwise. What is in the Veil of Whispers? An awakening, Kale replied. A node left dormant for too long. Explain properly, or this conversation ends, Lyra warned. Kale studied her for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. I am a Wayfinder, Commander. The last of an ancient Earth lineage tasked with locating and awakening the celestial nodes left by the precursors. Precursors? The ones who came before. The Seeders of Worlds. The architects of both our species' evolution. Kale's voice had taken on a formal cadence, as if reciting from memory. Long before your Reformation, before humanity's recorded history, they created a network spanning the galaxy. Points of power, communication, or transit. The purpose has been lost to time, but the network remains. Lyra wanted to dismiss his words as fantasy, but they resonated with fragments of forbidden knowledge, whispers passed down through her family line, ancient texts she had accessed against council regulations during her academy years. And the kneeling? What significance does that hold? Kale's expression softened. Prophecy, ritual, necessity, call it what you will. The nodes can only be activated by the combined presence of specific lineages. Your lineage, Commander. The old blood of Viation, untainted by the Reformation's genetic improvements. And mine, the Wayfinder line, preserved through centuries on Earth. He stepped closer. The kneeling is acknowledgement. Recognition of the role each must play. Had you not commanded it, had I not performed it, the pattern would have been broken before it began. You expect me to believe you orchestrated your ship's destruction and capture just for this. Ritual, not orchestrated, perhaps, but anticipated. Prepared for. Kale smiled. The paths converge as they must. Lyra felt the weight of decision pressing upon her. Everything in her Viation training told her this human was manipulating her, playing on forbidden knowledge and coincidence to achieve some unknown goal. Yet something deeper, intuition, perhaps, or the echo of her ancestors, whispered that his words held truth. There's an energy signature emanating from the coordinates in your encrypted data, she said finally. It appeared when we began decryption. Kale nodded. The node is responding. Awakening. It senses the proximity of those who can activate it. And if I take you there, then we discover what the precursors intended us to find. His eyes met hers, unflinching, and why your High Council has worked so hard to erase all knowledge of their existence. The scout vessel detached from the Stellara with minimal ceremony. Lyra had provided a plausible mission report, investigating an unusual energy signature that might indicate Draxian smuggler activity. It would justify her absence for the cycle it would take to reach the nebula and return. Kale sat in the co-pilot's chair, technically still a prisoner, but now something closer to a guide. He wore restraints that were more symbolic than functional, a concession to protocol that Lyra couldn't entirely abandon. As they approached the edge of the Veil of Whispers, the sensors began registering increasingly erratic readings. Swirls of charged particles created mesmerizing patterns against the void, while gravitational anomalies caused minor fluctuations in the ship's trajectory. Navigation systems are experiencing interference, Lyra noted, making manual adjustments to stabilize their course. The veil protects what it contains, Kale said. Follow the patterns in the energy flows, not the instruments. Lyra frowned, but began to observe the swirling nebula gases more carefully. After several minutes, she noticed subtle currents, paths of lesser resistance that seemed to wind through the chaotic energies. There, Kale pointed, that ribbon of blue-shifted particles. Follow it. Against her better judgment, Lyra adjusted their course to follow the indicated path. The ship's systems immediately registered smoother operation, the warning lights dimming as they penetrated deeper into the nebula. Time seemed to distort within the veil. What should have been hours felt like minutes. Yet Lyra's chronometer insisted they had been traveling for nearly a full cycle. The nebula's gases created an ever-shifting landscape of light and shadow, occasionally revealing glimpses of strange structures or energy formations that disappeared when observed directly. Your people once navigated these regions regularly, Kale said quietly. Before the Reformation. That's impossible. Our historical records would show. Your historical records were purged, Commander. Selectively edited to remove all reference to the precursors and the network they created. Kale gestured toward the viewport. Yet here we are, following paths your ancestors once traveled freely. Lyra wanted to dispute his claim, but found she couldn't. Ever since entering the nebula, she had experienced strange flashes of, not quite memory, but familiarity, as if some part of her recognized this place on a cellular level. The High Council claims to have guided Viation development for millennia, she said instead. Why would they erase such knowledge? Power, Kale replied simply. The network represents power beyond conventional technology. Power that would upend carefully constructed hierarchies and controlled narratives. Before Lyra could respond, a massive structure emerged from the nebula gases ahead. At first glance, it appeared to be an asteroid or small planetoid, but as they drew closer, artificial elements became apparent. Vast curves and angles too precise to be natural, surfaces that reflected light despite eons of cosmic weathering. The node, Kale whispered, reverence in his voice. It was enormous, at least 20 kilometers in diameter, a seamless blend of asteroid material and constructed elements. Its architecture was both familiar and alien, echoing certain elements of ancient Viation design, but on a scale and with a complexity that left Lyra speechless. As their vessel approached, dormant lights began to flicker across the structure's surface. Energy readings spiked, then stabilized into a rhythmic pulse that matched the signal they had detected from the Stellara. It's responding to our presence, Lyra murmured. To your presence, Kale corrected. The blood of ancient Viation flows in you, Commander. The node recognizes its caretakers. Lyra guided their vessel toward what appeared to be a docking structure, a massive opening flanked by crystalline formations that emitted soft, pulsing light. As they neared, the opening widened slightly, energy barriers shimmering as they adjusted to accommodate the approaching ship. How do you know the node won't simply destroy us? Lyra asked. Faith, Kale replied. And history. My ancestors recorded successful activations of other nodes. None described destruction. That's hardly reassuring. If certainty is what you seek, Commander, you should have reported to your High Council instead of bringing me here. The truth of his words silenced her. They had passed the point of safe return the moment she had decided to investigate without informing High Command. As their vessel entered the docking structure, artificial gravity engaged smoothly, settling them onto a crystalline platform. Environmental readings indicated a breathable atmosphere, another impossibility after thousands of years of abandonment. The station is awakening, Kale said, preparing itself for our arrival. They disembarked cautiously. The air smelled surprisingly fresh, with subtle undertones of ozone and something like cinnamon. The interior spaces were vast, cavernous chambers with soaring ceilings and walls inscribed with the same glyphs they had found in Kale's encrypted data. Lyra ran her fingers over the inscriptions. These are religious symbols from pre-Reformation Viation culture. How could they be here? Or perhaps, Kale suggested gently, the symbols in your culture came from here. Remnants of knowledge passed down through generations, even as their origin was forgotten. They moved deeper into the station, following corridors that seemed to respond to their presence, lighting their path, opening doorways before they reached them. The architecture was both organic and geometric, with flowing lines that nevertheless adhered to precise mathematical principles. As they progressed, Lyra began experiencing more intense flashes of recognition. Brief visions of the station as it once was, filled with beings that resembled Viation but more varied in form, working alongside entities that might have been evolutionary ancestors of humans. Are you seeing this? She asked Kale. The echoes? Yes, though differently than you, I suspect. The station remembers its purpose and shows us what we need to understand. They entered a vast circular chamber at what appeared to be the center of the station. In its middle stood a crystalline structure resembling a tree, with branches reaching toward the domed ceiling and roots extending into the floor. Pulsing energy flowed through it like sap, growing stronger as they approached. "What is this place?" Lyra whispered. "A nexus point, one of many scattered throughout the galaxy." Kale moved toward the crystal tree. The precursors created these to connect worlds, to share knowledge and resources across vast distances. Why will my people abandon such technology? They didn't abandon it. It was taken from them. Kale's expression darkened. Somewhere in your history, those who would become your High Council decided that control was more important than connection. They systematically destroyed knowledge of the network, rewrote Viation history, and embarked on a reformation, reshaping your society into a rigid hierarchy with themselves at the apex. The accusation struck Lyra like a physical blow. It contradicted everything she had been taught about Viation history, yet resonated with questions she had harbored since her academy days. Inconsistencies in historical records, gaps in technological development timelines, the Council's obsessive control of archaeological findings. "How do you know this?" she demanded. "The Wayfinders have preserved knowledge that others lost or destroyed. We've pieced together the fragmented history of both our species." Kale approached the crystal tree. "This node contains records that would confirm everything I've told you, if we can activate it." Lyra joined him before the tree. Up close, she could see that what had appeared to be a natural crystal formation was in fact an incredibly complex technological construct, each branch and root a conduit for energy and information. "How do we activate it?" "Together," Kale said simply. He extended his hand toward a depression in the trunk that perfectly matched a Viation palm. "Your genetic signature, my knowledge. The key and the lock." Lyra hesitated, years of Viation training and loyalty warring with the intuitive certainty that Kale spoke the truth. If she activated this ancient technology, there would be no returning to her former life. The High Council would label her a traitor at best, a delusional relic worshipper at worst. Yet if she turned back now, the truth about Viation history, about the precursors and their network, might remain buried forever. Before she could decide, an alarm sounded from their vessel. They rushed back to find a priority communication from the Stellara. "Commander, Varen's image flickered with interference. A Viation battle group has entered this sector. They're demanding your immediate return and the surrender of the human prisoner. They claim authority directly from the High Council." Lyra's blood ran cold. "How did they find us?" "Unknown, Commander. But they've issued an ultimatum. If you don't respond within one rotation, they will consider you compromised and take appropriate action." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving them in silence. "They must have been monitoring the decryption process more closely than I realized," Lyra said. "Or perhaps the energy signature from the node alerted them." "It doesn't matter how they found us," Kale replied. "What matters is what you choose to do now." Lyra stared at the communication display, mind racing. Protocol demanded she comply with the battle group's orders. Duty to the Viation hierarchy required her to surrender Kale and submit to whatever investigation followed. Yet something deeper than protocol stirred within her, a sense of responsibility to truth, to the ancient legacy that had been hidden from her people for generations. "If what you've told me is true," she said slowly, "activating the node would reveal knowledge the High Council has suppressed for centuries. Knowledge that belongs to both our species," Kale confirmed. "Understanding that could transform our future." Lyra made her decision. "We have one rotation before they take action. Let's use it." They returned to the central chamber, where the crystal tree pulsed with increasing intensity, as if anticipating their return. Lyra studied the mechanism more carefully now, noting how the depression in the trunk was surrounded by symbols representing the oldest Viation houses, including her own ancestral line. "Place your hand here," Kale instructed, indicating the depression. "I'll provide the activation sequence." Lyra removed her command glove and pressed her palm against the cool crystal surface. Immediately, energy surged through the contact point, causing the entire structure to illuminate from within. Kale knelt beside her, assuming the same perfect posture he had shown in the interrogation chamber. He began reciting what sounded like an incantation in a language Lyra didn't recognize, yet somehow understood on an instinctive level. With each phrase, the crystal tree responded, branches extending, roots deepening into the station floor. Information began flowing through the structure, first as abstract patterns of light, then coalescing into comprehensible images and symbols. The dome above them transformed into a vast projection of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light marking what Lyra now understood to be other nodes in the network. Many were dormant, appearing as dim sparks, but others glowed with active energy. The network, Kale breathed, still intact after all this time. Historical records began to manifest around them, holographic displays showing the true history of both species, the precursors seeding of multiple worlds, the early development of Viation and human civilizations. The network's original purpose, not domination or control, but connection and mutual protection against a threat from beyond the galaxy's edge. Then came the divergence, the rise of a faction within Viation society that sought to control the network for themselves, eventually becoming what would be known as the High Council. Their systematic destruction of knowledge, the genetic modifications they introduced to limit psionic abilities except in bloodlines they could control, the reformation that transformed a once diverse and exploration-focused species into a rigid hierarchy. Parallel records showed human development, more chaotic, but preserving certain knowledge through secret societies and lineages like the Wayfinders, who maintained the ritualistic knowledge necessary to access the network. "Everything you told me," Lyra whispered. "It's all here, and more," Kale replied. "Knowledge that belongs to both our peoples." The station shuddered suddenly, alarms blaring through the ancient corridors. "They're here," Lyra said, checking her communicator. "The battle group has found us. They're demanding immediate surrender." "The activation sequence isn't complete," Kale warned. "The node is awakening, but hasn't fully integrated with the network yet." "How much longer?" "Minutes, perhaps. But once the battle group secures the station, they'll shut it down and ensure it can never be activated again." Lyra faced the most significant choice of her life: surrender to the High Council's representatives, maintaining the order she had served faithfully until now, or complete the activation, revealing truths that would shatter that order forever. In that moment, she thought of her ancestors, those who had navigated the Veil of Whispers before the Reformation, who had worked alongside the precursors and, perhaps, alongside humans as well. She thought of generations of Viation who had lived under the Council's carefully constructed history, never knowing the truth of their origins or potential. "Continue the activation," she told Kale. "I'll buy us time." Using her commander's authorization codes, Lyra accessed the station's ancient defense systems. They responded sluggishly at first, then with increasing responsiveness as the node continued to awaken. Nothing that would destroy the approaching Viation vessels, but enough to delay their boarding parties. She returned to find Kale still kneeling before the crystal tree, the activation sequence nearing completion. The entire chamber pulsed with energy now, the holographic displays showing the node connecting to others across the galaxy, awakening dormant systems that had slept for millennia. "It's working," Kale said without breaking his concentration. "The network recognizes you, recognizes us together." Lyra placed her hand on the crystal surface again, feeling energy surge through her body. For a moment, she experienced perfect connection to the station, to the network, to Kale, and strangely, to her ancestors who had stood in this very chamber countless generations ago. The station shuddered again as the battle group's vessels attached to the outer docking points. Warning displays showed armed boarding parties cutting through ancient barriers, making their way toward the central chamber. "They're coming," Lyra warned. "Then let them come," Kale replied, rising from his kneeling position. Let them witness what they've tried so hard to prevent. The crystal tree had transformed completely now, its branches extending throughout the chamber, connecting to systems that had been dormant for eons. The holographic displays shifted to show not just historical records, but real-time data. The status of every active node in the network, the vast resources and knowledge they contained, the potential they represented. As the first sounds of the boarding party reached them, armored footsteps and energy weapons charging, the activation sequence completed. A pulse of energy exploded outward from the crystal tree, passing harmlessly through Lyra and Kale, but spreading throughout the station and beyond. The massive doors to the central chamber slid open to reveal a Viation tactical team led by an Archon of the High Council, one of the 12 most powerful individuals in Viation society. Commander Lyra. The Archon's voice reverberated with both spoken and psionic authority. You are charged with treason against the Viation Concord. Surrender the human and submit to judgment. Lyra stood tall beside the now fully activated crystal tree, its light illuminating her silver eyes. I cannot comply, Archon. Not now that I know the truth. What truth? The Archon demanded, though something in his posture suggested he already knew. The truth your council has hidden for generations. About our origins. About the precursors. About this network that belongs to both Viation and humans. The Archon's face hardened. Primitive superstitions and dangerous technology. We've guided our people away from such things for their own protection. You've controlled them through lies, Kale interjected. And now those lies are exposed. The tactical team raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the energy pulse that had emanated from the crystal tree returned, amplified 1,000-fold. It washed over everyone in the chamber, and as it passed through them, Lyra saw understanding dawn on the faces of the Viation soldiers. The pulse contained information, the true history of their species, evidence of the Council's manipulations, knowledge that had been suppressed for centuries. Every Viation touched by the pulse would know what Lyra now knew. The Archon staggered back, horrified understanding in his eyes. What have you done? Restored what was taken, Lyra replied. The pulse is spreading throughout Viation space as we speak, carried by the network. Every Viation will know the truth. You've destroyed order, the Archon hissed. Millennia of careful guidance, undone in an instant. We've restored freedom, Kale corrected. The freedom to know your true heritage. The freedom to connect with a network that was meant for both our species. The tactical team lowered their weapons, confusion and awakening understanding visible on their faces. The Archon looked from them to Lyra, recognizing that his authority was already crumbling. This isn't over, he warned, backing toward the door. The Council will not fall so easily. Perhaps not, Lyra acknowledged, but they will never again rule through ignorance. As the Archon retreated, Lyra turned to the crystal tree, which now projected a comprehensive map of the network. Hundreds of nodes scattered across the galaxy, many still dormant, waiting to be awakened. What happens now? She asked Kale. Now we continue what we've started, he replied. Awakening nodes, reconnecting worlds, preparing. Preparing for what? Kale's expression grew serious. The precursors built this network for a reason, Commander. Not just for knowledge or connection, but for protection. Something is coming or returning. The fragments of knowledge preserved by the Wayfinders speak of an ancient threat from beyond the galactic rim. The precursors encountered it once before and barely survived. They built this network as an early warning system and, if necessary, a defense. Lyra absorbed this new information, her mind racing with implications. And this threat, do you know what it is? Only shadows and whispers, Kale admitted. The records describe it as the void that consumes, an entity or force that devours light, life, and even reality itself. The precursors believed it operated on cycles, retreating for millennia before returning. And you believe its return is imminent. Kale nodded. The timing of our meeting was not coincidence, Commander. The network has been reactivating nodes across the galaxy, preparing for what comes. Your lineage and mine, Their keys, created by the precursors to ensure the network could be awakened when needed. Lyra gazed at the galactic map, noting how few nodes were currently active. There's so much work to be done. Yes, Kale agreed. And not much time. Behind them, the tactical team had begun to disperse, some remaining to secure the chamber, others retreating to communicate with their vessels. Without the Archon's presence, they seemed uncertain, caught between ingrained loyalty to the High Council and the new knowledge flooding their consciousness. One of them, a young officer named Terran, approached Lyra. "Commander, the battle group is requesting instructions. The Archon has returned to his vessel, but has issued no orders." "Tell him to stand by," Lyra replied, "and open a channel to the Stellara. First Officer Varen needs to be informed of our status." As Terran moved to comply, Lyra turned back to Kale. "I've committed treason against the High Council. There's no going back." "Perhaps," Kale said with a slight smile, "what you've actually done is restore loyalty to something older and truer than the Council. Your ancestors helped build this network alongside mine. We're simply reclaiming our shared legacy." The crystal tree pulsed in response, projecting new information, detailed schematics of the node systems, coordinates of nearby dormant nodes, and protocols for full activation of the network's defensive capabilities. "The node is offering us its knowledge," Lyra observed, "teaching us how to proceed. As it was designed to do," Kale confirmed. "Each node contains specific information, pieces of a greater whole. Some hold historical records, others technical specifications, still others strategic data about the threat we face." Lyra has studied the flowing information with growing determination. The truth had been hidden from her people for too long. Whatever consequences she might face for her actions today, she couldn't regret them. "What's our next step?" she asked. "We need to establish a permanent presence here, secure this node against potential Council retaliation, and begin planning missions to activate the next set of dormant nodes." Kale gestured to the galactic map. "According to the network's protocols, we should focus on these 3 locations first. They form a strategic triangle that will strengthen the entire network once activated." Lyra nodded, already thinking like the commander she was. "We'll need resources, personnel we can trust, vessels capable of reaching these coordinates. The battle group outside might be a start," Kale suggested. "If the information pulse affected them as it did the tactical team, many may be questioning their allegiance to the Council right now." "A reasonable assumption," Lyra agreed. "But convincing an entire battle group to commit treason is another matter entirely." "Is it treason?" Kale challenged gently. "Or is it restoration? The Council has betrayed the true heritage of the Viation. You're offering your people a chance to reclaim it." Before Lyra could respond, Terran returned. "Commander, First Officer Varen requests to speak with you urgently. And there's something else. 3 of the battle group vessels have disengaged from the Archon's command and are requesting to place themselves under your authority." Lyra and Kale exchanged a glance of surprised hope. "It seems the choice may be easier for some than we anticipated," Kale observed. Lyra straightened her posture, feeling the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. "Patch Varen through and inform the 3 vessels that I accept their allegiance to the truth, not to me personally." As Terran moved to carry out her orders, Lyra gazed once more at the activated node, its crystal tree pulsing with ancient wisdom and power. What had begun as a routine border patrol had transformed into something far greater, a revolution, a restoration, a preparation for a threat most couldn't yet comprehend. And it had all started with a simple command: "Kneel, human." A command Kale had been waiting for across years and light years, guided by knowledge passed down through generations of wayfinders. "Was it worth the wait?" she asked him softly. Kale smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Every moment, Commander. Every moment." The crystal tree pulsed brighter, as if in agreement, its light spreading throughout the ancient station. Outside, the Viation vessels moved into protective formation around the node, their commanders having made their choice. In the vastness beyond the galactic rim, something stirred, sensing, perhaps, the the reawakening of its ancient adversary's defense network. The void that consumes would find resistance when it returned. Lyra placed her hand on the crystal trunk once more, feeling the energy flow through her, connecting her to her ancestors, to the network, to Kale, and to a future suddenly filled with both danger and hope. "Then let's begin," she said. The node responded, its light reaching outward to touch the stars.